everybody, Josh Sigurdson, World Alternative Media here, and of course we are joined by G. Edward Griffin, and we will be joining him soon at the Red Pill Expo 2019 in Connecticut, Hartford, Connecticut, which we are looking very much forward to. We're going to get into that later on in the show. I decided, I thought, Mr. Griffin is such a wealth of information, has so many great insights into so many issues around the world. I figured it would be good to do a weekly-ish show with him, talking about events that are important to all of us that are in the news. And first, before we get into all of that, Mr. Griffin, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you, Josh. It's my pleasure to be on your program.
Absolutely. Yeah, like we said, weekly-ish. It's both of us end up doing one thing or another, and we'll try to make it as weekly as possible. But with that said, let's get into the first subject I wanted to talk with you about, sir, was 5G. It's something that is catching headlines everywhere right now. A lot of proponents, when you consider, all the big telecom companies that are sponsoring big stories in, mainstream media. And then at the same time, there's an active rebellion against this this massive rollout of this technology, the fifth generation 5G. Could it be risky to our health? Could it cause defects? Could it be insanely inefficient to unroll? What are your thoughts on 5G technology going into the future?
Boy, that is really the question of the month, I'm going to say, maybe the year. But the reason I say the month is because I thought I was keeping up pretty well with all of the 5G stories that are out there. It's a horrible story. I knew that. We're not getting the truth. It's an ideal topic for the Red Pill Expo, because that's what Red Pill is all about. Take the red pill and see through the illusion and face reality, even though it may not be very pleasant. So we decided to make it a major topic for the Red Pill Expo coming up in June. And since then, though, I've had a chance to look at a lot more information, a lot more research papers, a lot of videos that I've found on various places on the internet. Some were not published. They were sent to me privately. And I have been blown away. There was so much I did not know about it, Josh. And the short answer is that it's awful. It's one of the most ridiculous, absurd, maddening situations you can possibly imagine. Because in a nutshell, let's say I really should have thought this thing through so I could give you a nice, concise summary, but let's see how I come up with it. This 5G phenomenon is a rollout of technology, digital cell tower technology, that's being sold to the people as a wonderful thing because they'll be able to see videos faster, download them faster. They'll be able to play games faster on their computers, and all that's being sold as wonderful technology. But the backside of it, the other side of it, the dark side of it is not being promoted. In fact, it's being hidden. And the dark side is that this is not only hazardous to your health, that's the understatement of the century. This technology is going to it's going to kill people. Let's just put it simply. It's going to kill a lot of people, and mostly it'll be the kids, because their neurological systems are still developing. I didn't know the science was real on this until recently, but this high-frequency radio energy that's engulfing us already is going to be 10 times stronger in a very short period of time. 10 times, maybe 100 times stronger in some geographical areas, particularly in the cities. And the frequency is going to go up. Now, I didn't know this. I had to learn it. But the frequency of the signal, how do I say this? I know I was supposed to be making this short, right? That's funny. Here I go with a long thing. But there's so much to think about. The frequency, I found out that like 10 years ago, everybody said, don't worry about cell phones or electric blankets or anything like that, because they're all low frequencies and they don't couple with the cells of the body. You have to get higher frequencies than that. Or actually, it was the other way around. They had to get to low frequencies before it starts coupling with the cells of the body and heats things up like in a microwave. That was the only thing that people were looking at. It was, does it heat you up like in a microwave? Never dreaming that it had other effects other than heating. It had effects at the molecular level, at the cellular level, actually at the atomic level, and it messes up the DNA, it messes up the enzymes in the system, it really messes up the neurological system. And the higher you go on the frequency, the more dangerous it becomes. And we've never had anything like 5G before. These are millimeter length wavelengths, millimeter, and lo and behold, that is precisely the frequency range that the military has been developing for the last 10 years as weapons of war, to control people, to kill people, to put them in pain and agony. It's a weapon of war they're installing right outside our bedrooms now. So at first I didn't want to believe it. I said, no, they would never do this. I mean, they'll do awful things. They'll fight wars, they'll kill millions of people, but they're other people. They would never do something that would be, here on their own ground, their own population. Nah, they wouldn't do it. Well, I'm here to tell you they are doing it, and they're going to do it if we don't stop them. So that's my initial thought on it, Josh. You probably know as much or more about it than I do.
Well, I think it's really important to point out that even the National Cancer Institute itself, which is not a good organization, they themselves admit that it affects a hormonal melatonin creation, which can lead to cancer. But that's just what the National Cancer Institute admits to. Of course, they always unroll this under the guise of convenience, right? They always, it's like holding keys in front of a baby and hoping that the baby grabs them. It's a way to kind of roll out this massive mesh grid, which is largely inescapable. And as you said, outside your bedroom, it's very true outside your bedroom, because they will have to put up hubs basically in front of every house, and in many cases in front of many bedrooms. And we already see that to an extent when you look at apartment buildings, when you see these cell receivers right outside of people's bedrooms. And you can only imagine what that does to people over a long period of time. It's terrifying. And there are a few examples recently, Ed, where there have been city halls that have been banning 5G. There have been countries that have been attempting to ban 5G, and there's a few interesting stories like that. I'm not a fan of government in general, as many of our viewers know, but at the same time, I also see that a lot of these telecom giants have been funded by, Defense Department contracts, Department of Homeland Security, the NSA. And so it's kind of like government propped up monopolies are pushing this on people, and then people at more local levels are trying to ban it. What do you think is an answer potentially for escaping what seems to be completely inescapable?
Well, at this stage, I don't think you can escape it. You've got to stop it. And that's an easy thing to say. How do you stop it? The juggernaut is already there. The funding is there. There are hundreds of thousands of workmen, as we speak, putting up these towers right now in cities all over the United States. In fact, all over the world. They're putting them up in Europe. They've been banned in some countries in Europe, as you pointed out. Israel has banned them, and for good reason. Although they're interestingly enough, they're at the head of the pack in terms of developing software and generators for the system, but they're not going to have it in their country. They'll build it for us or anybody else that wants to buy it, install it. But anyway, you asked what can you do to prevent yourself? I don't know. I'm looking very hard to see if there's any technology, any nutritional substance that could get this stuff out of your system, that could clean the system after it's already been radiated. You can't stop it. If you're standing in front of a radiator, it's going to go into your body unless you walk around in a lead suit or something like that.
Yeah, or a tinfoil hat or something.
Yeah, a pyramid. Who knows? It might have to come to that.
Yeah.
But I'm looking for anything to see if there's any hope that we could clean it out after we've been exposed to it. But the only way, I think, for our kids to survive, and in many cases us too, and our grandkids, and for the future of mankind, is to put a stop to this and dismantle the system while we still can. Because once the DNA is altered, it's reproducible through generation after generation. It's not reversible. Mm-hmm. So once we mess up the human genome, it's messed up forever. Mm-hmm. And people don't realize that this is really going on. I had an inkling of it, but it wasn't until this last month when I decided we were going to put it on the Red Pill Expo that I really got immersed in it. And, you mentioned something before. People know, and even the Cancer Society admits that, this stuff is dangerous. Scientists will admit that. Even the companies, the telecom companies that are putting these things up. So, oh yeah, this is dangerous. All right, we got to be careful. We got to be careful. You get the idea that they're right on top of it. Oh yeah, the guidelines that are set by the FCC are this many wavelengths and this amount of strength per second. They got all the numbers there, and we're below that. We're below these guidelines, so we're okay. What they don't tell you is that the guidelines were written by the telecom industry, not written by scientists. It was written by the telecom industry to suit their own purposes. And then they paid somebody at the FCC to adopt it. In fact, all these FCC heads of that organization the last couple have come from the telecom industry. This is the head of the FCC, comes from the industry that they're regulating. It's what they call regulatory capture. Mm-hmm. So anybody said, oh, well, don't worry about it. We're going according to the guidelines. That means nothing. In fact, it means a lot. It means that you're being conned.
Mm-hmm. And I did read an article a while back ago from 2009 about how scientists have developed Wi-Fi proof paint. The biggest issue with that, I looked into the components of the paint that actually blocks out Wi-Fi. And again, this is from 2009. I don't know if it can shield from something like 5G, but I remember reading it, and it's made largely of aluminum. And it's like, yeah, that's what we need, little pieces of aluminum on all of our walls floating in the air, as if there's not enough of that. Biggest cause of Alzheimer's. So there's so many problems with that, and obviously, it's inefficient in the sense where, like, they're not going to be able to unroll 5G for a very long time in the middle of the woods or, in small towns. So there's that. But of course, as the UN has been trying for so long, they're trying to push people into big cities, into small apartments, build up instead of outwards, and that's a huge problem, and we could go into that all day. But I wanted to lead in from this to the cashless society, because with 5G, it will be so much more easy to track people, to give people, social credit scores like in places like China, to follow people around, to basically unroll their technocratic super state that has been talked about so long, going back to, Mao and Henry Kissinger meeting up, and then the alliance leading to the Trilateral Commission and Zbigniew Brzezinski, now leading to today, where police are walking around the streets with facial recognition goggles, where anyone that walks by, it spots their face, it puts their social credit above their head, and it decides if these people can eat at certain restaurants, if they're criminals, if they've criticized the government, if they want to fly anywhere, they have to have a high-pitched ringing sound blasting in their ear if their social credit score is low. It's absolutely disgusting, and obviously we've seen that the Chinese government, China is set to surpass the United States in power in the coming years. So obviously there is a rollout towards this direction. What do you think about this rollout of the cashless society, how it's growing at such a fast scale in places like China, and how it is on our own doorsteps?
Well, I think you've summarized it pretty well, Josh. It is a phenomenon that is worldwide. We used to think, well, the United States would never do anything like that. China, well, that's a communist country, right? What do you expect? A communist country. That's what they had in the Soviet Union. That's what they had in Cuba and all the places where they put people in concentration camps and tortured them. And then years later, we find out we have concentration camps and we're torturing them, people there. And we found out that we're doing the same thing that the Chinese and the Germans did and the Nazis. And oh my gosh, well, how did this happen? We fought wars against communism and fascism and Nazism, and now we're building it right here at home under a different name. National security is its name, or fighting drugs is its name, or fighting child pornography is its name. All of these things that scare people, sometimes rightfully so, sometimes not rightfully so, but they're all frightful things, and people are willing to give up their security, willing to give up their privacy, willing to give up their health, even maybe their lives, in return for being protected against these big bugaboos that are everywhere waiting to strike us. And so the whole world now is becoming pretty much the same, even though they're different nations, they speak different languages, they have different cultures, but it's all moving toward this one culture of collectivism, which means that everybody is serving the state. The state is all powerful. The state is all wise. The state is all good, and you must serve the state, or you will be eliminated. Now that is it's not. It sounds like it should be the basis for a science fiction movie or a novel. Like 1984. 10 years later or 100 years later.
Yeah.
It's being developed right now. I used to say, oh gosh, I hope we can stop this because I hate to see the world that my grandkids are going to live under. And then I got to saying, well, gee, I hope we can stop this, so I hate to see the kind of world my kids are going to live under. And now I'm saying, yeah, I hope we can stop this because look what we're living under right now. It's coming that close. So it's really serious business.
Yeah, it's unbelievable how fast it's moved. And you mentioned it's like a sci-fi movie. It reminds me of the Tower of Babel. Everyone is speaking the same language. Everyone's under one giant roof, and everyone becomes God. It goes back to that old saying, the people become God, and they anger the gods, and the gods lash back at them for all becoming the new God. And that's a lot of ways what we're seeing with government. Government has become the new God. People are worshiping government. They can't live without it. They're dependent on this entity that they can't name any examples of how it served them. They sure can point out where they've taken off their paychecks or where they've done something that, hurts them, or when they're driving down the streets and looking over their shoulders because there's a police car driving behind them. It's kind of a strange scenario where it's like out of a science fiction novel, but so much more crazier than any of those novels back from the 50s, 40s, 50s. I can only imagine, like you kind of went into there, how much it's changed in your lifetime, seeing it go to the point of facial recognition and social credit scores. I mean, that's even beyond the Logan's Run flashing diamond in your hand. It's time's up. You have to die now. It's so over the top. I can't even imagine what it's like to have witnessed this move so fast, so suddenly. Was it a sudden thing, or was there kind of this push for a cashless system, back 40 years ago?
Well, the push for the cashless system is quite old, at least 40 years ago. In fact, I don't exactly remember what book it was, but it was an old book that I ran across when I was researching for the Federal Reserve System, and it was a monetary commentary of some kind. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to guess it was published about 1920 or 25 in that range. And they were talking about someday we'll have something other than cash. Mm-hmm. And they didn't use the word social credit, but they used the concept, the idea that somehow there would be a big accounting system, and the wise men, the leaders of society, our rulers, would figure it all out, and we would have a monetary system built upon social credit. In other words, our worth in society. But it's the same thing with the Chinese, except now they've harnessed the power of computers and digital technology to make it happen. Whereas back in the 1920s or the 1930s, they were thinking there would have to be buildings full of bureaucrats and filing cabinets and paperwork to do all of that, keep records. So the idea is quite old. Both the cashless society and the social credit or the social rating, the ideas are old, but the technology has suddenly exploded upon us, and it's allowing real-time development of that in our lifetime. And so it's no longer fiction, it's real. And sometimes you hear the term technocracy. Well, technocracy was developed, I think it had its origin in the United States, but it had its roots here. I think it came in the 1930s or thereabouts, and about the same time that I'm talking. And these people, quite a strong movement, were in those days looking forward to an age in which everything would be run by machines. They didn't use the phrase artificial intelligence. That hadn't been coined yet, to my knowledge. But they were using the concept that the machines would have figured out everything. And all we had to do was just step back and put humanity aside and forget. In fact, it was almost a handicap to be human, because machines could do everything and make the right decision so much better than humans. Machines would have no emotion. Machines couldn't hate. Machines couldn't be envious. Machines couldn't want revenge, and all of those things that humans do. And that they were trying to make a case that those emotions were what made life so horrible. And so therefore, technocracy was built on the assumption that machines would take over and man would probably someday be pushed aside if he was allowed to exist at all. Yeah. Well, this is right out of today's literature. They're actually working on things like that with robots and artificial intelligence. And now China, as you say, getting a social credit system, and they can look at goggles and see exactly everything about you. You can look at your rating right there. If anything, if you're below a 5, you're through, brother. You got to have a rating of 20 or 25 before you can get on the bus. Mm-hmm. And if your rating is at 5, you can't even buy an apple. You're going to be going hungry.
Yeah.
So it's here. That's the point. It's no longer fiction. It's here.
It's quite incredible, even when now the news is talking about robot rights and, seeing robots as people too, like Sophia the robot, which interestingly enough in my studies I've come across the fact that the Sumerians called the god of wisdom Sophia, and I think that's where the name comes from for this robot. Very, very strange, and not the most efficient looking robot ever either. It makes you wonder what the government has behind closed doors that we're not seeing. Sometimes I don't even want to know, but eventually I'm gonna find out. So best to know now. But I wanted to talk about with the cashless society comes what we're seeing today in the economy, where we see a recession on the horizon. I mean, the yield curve inversion has always shown there's a recession down the line every single time. We've never seen a case where the yield curve has inverted where there isn't a recession soon after. And that's, of course, the 10-year government bond inverting with the 3-month. And in Canada, it's a 10 and the 1 month. And it's absolutely unbelievable because we're seeing all these things seem to accumulate at the same time. And now I know people are going to watch this and say, you've been saying this for a long time. And I think we've been right for a long time because fundamentally the economy should have crashed and collapsed a long time ago. There's no saying when it's going to happen. It's just basic economics. But with that said, I wanted to get your thoughts on this push for, Trump is talking about he wants to bring interest rates down 0.5%, bring in Herman Cain to be on the board at the Federal Reserve. I mean, all this complete theater, it's getting ridiculous, and interest rates are so low that if we had a recession or any kind of crash, it would have to go negative. So what do you think about the current state of the United States economy?
Well, I guess it depends on what my mood is at the moment. I am always fluctuating between stages of great optimism and great despair. I guess it's whether I've had coffee or a glass of wine.
This is true.
But there's reason for both attitudes. We see, there's a lot of popular support among the average person for the free economy. They love to hear people say, "Let's restore the free economy." Now, of course, we know that they're cranking out the collectivist kids, the socialists, and the fascists and the Nazis. They don't know that they're that, but it's collectivism. And they're saying down with capitalism and so forth. They don't realize that capitalism was put down decades ago. We haven't seen capitalism in the United States in our whole lifetime. Mm-hmm. And in fact, it was practically gone when I was born in traditional capitalism. We've been living under socialism and to a large degree, growing.
Yeah, outside of like garage sales or flea markets, we haven't seen
that's
capitalism.
Where you find capitalism anymore. Mm-hmm. So the young people that are in this crusade to, save the system and want to get rid of capitalism, they're being tricked, unfortunately. Their intentions are good. I identify with their motives. They realize the system is rotten, but they think it's free enterprise capitalism that's rotten, but they don't realize it's crony socialism. It's collectivism that's rotten. And so what they're out there saying, let's have more government control, let's turn the banks over to the government. Well, they don't realize that the banks and the government are all the same thing right now anyway. They don't see that. So where I'm going with that is that I see this awareness, great awareness among people at all age levels and all strata of life, even all educational backgrounds, that they know something is wrong, and they want it to be better. Everybody has the same goal. They care about their fellow human beings. Of course, they care about their families and their own friends first. That's the way it should be. You can't help others if you're drowning, you can't save somebody else. So everybody wants the right thing, but what they don't realize is how to go about it. What they don't realize is that calling for more government to take care of all of these problems. They don't realize that the government created the problems in the first place. And not just the government. When I say the government, I'm talking about those hidden interests that have moved into the government. And largely through money, huge amounts of money, they've been able to buy up the political leaders. And you think you're voting for somebody to go to Congress, but you don't realize that the candidates on both parties have been selected very carefully by people with big checkbooks. So they don't really care which one wins. They fight against each other, left versus right, so-called, Republicans versus Democrat, all these big arguments. On some issues, there are real arguments, but not the big issues. The big issues like the economy. Are we going to have fiat money? Are we going to continue the Federal Reserve System, which is a banking cartel? Are we going to keep American sovereignty, or are we going to just become part of a world government controlled by all the collectivist nations of the world, and we're just one little cipher? Mm-hmm. Those are the big issues, and you'll never find anybody at the top of either political party that disagrees on those issues. They're all fighting over relatively secondary issues, things which can be changed later on. Mm-hmm. Things that cannot be changed later on, like the loss of American sovereignty, there's no contest. You can't even talk about it. There's no debate. So getting back to the track, I see the growing awareness among all segments of the population that something is wrong and they want to do something about it. And for the first time in my life, I'm finding it not only easy, but it's overly easy to start a conversation on these things because people want to talk about it, to the point where I don't want to talk about it anymore. I've been thinking, working on it all day long. Do we have to still stick with that at 11 o'clock at night? But it wasn't that way 10 years ago or 15 years ago. People just didn't want to hear anything negative because they thought everything was fine. So that's the positive side, the euphoria. I'm all enlightened, and I should say not enlightened, but excited over that, because it means that we can reach out to people with our message and give the facts. The negative side of that is the curtain is coming down. The curtain is coming down, and we don't have much time to change the act on the stage before the curtain comes down and the play is over. Mm-hmm. So time is our enemy, and I'm very discouraged about how little time it seems that we have. I'm sure we have more than we think, but it feels like it's very close to some kind of a catastrophe. Yeah. So I fluctuate, Josh, probably as you do, between positive and negative emotions. It's an exciting time to live, and I'm really glad I'm living in this era because, it gives us a chance to really do something that might really affect the future, a long time into the future. Perhaps what we do today in this battle we're in might affect life on this planet for thousands of years. So it's a chance.
I find myself most negative when I read YouTube comments. I find myself most optimistic when I talk to people on the streets in everyday life and realize that either most people don't have an opinion and don't have an identity either that they cling to apathetically. So they're able to be molded. You can talk to them and discuss these issues and they won't immediately think that you're crazy. And then you talk to people online that are very active and people are stuck in their viewpoints. You see, there's a lot of problems with people always looking to confirm their bias, and the confirmation bias psychology is really an interesting one to study because, for example, you can talk about how Donald Trump's attacking the Federal Reserve, and it's like it's great. That if you're only looking to see that Donald Trump is attacking the Federal Reserve, that's great. He sounds amazing, and then it's like, oh, but he just called for more quantitative easing, more printing of currency. Oh, but let's not look at that. Or it's like, oh, Trump's pulling out of Syria. That's great. Well, let's not look at the fact that he just decided that he's going to keep troops in Syria in order to protect Israel and to protect the world, his words. Let's not look at that. And it seems like, and this happened under Obama and Bush and Clinton, every president, people have this kind of, they need to confirm their bias. They need to prove to themselves that they were right for voting for this person or the other. And it's just that perpetual nature of collectivism. Someone needs to lead. I can't lead myself. It's so much easier to sit back and hope someone else does it for me. But at that same point, I think that it's very optimistic to see the amount of people that are talking about ways to change things, solutions, ways to get around this system, protecting their purchasing power, being free and responsible. I mean, the millennial generation isn't the most responsible generation by far. I know this. I am one. Most of the people around me that are my age are not very good at preparing themselves for things in the future. But a lot of things come from experience. And when you experience something bad in your life, you try to ensure that that same thing doesn't happen again. It's going to take a lot of pain and a lot of hardship in order to overcome what's coming in the near future, inevitably, as all fiat currencies eventually fail. And as your book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, pointed out so incredibly well. But with that said, I want to kind of switch gears a bit of a different topic altogether, and that is diabetes, because I recently saw an email. You send out a subscription newsletter to people's emails, and I saw you wrote something about diabetes and can type 2 diabetes be reversed? And I thought this was very interesting to switch from economics and the end of the world to possibly talking a bit about something that might help our viewers here, because you were on your way to potentially being diabetic in the future. You were told about 20 years ago, according to your the email that you sent out. Can you go into this a bit and how people can look into actually reversing type 2 diabetes?
Yeah, I'd be glad to say what I know about it. I want to start off by saying there's a lot I don't know about that. But I think the best place to start in answering your question is with my history of being interested in this topic. Now, everybody's interested in their health, but usually they're not interested in it until they lose it. You know how that works. I remember when I was a young guy, I thought, gee, there are two kinds of people in the world. There are the sick people and the healthy people. I'm glad I'm one of the healthy people. Too bad about those people over there. I wonder how that happened. Oh, well, it never happened to me because, look, I'm a healthy person, right? I'm one of the lucky ones. And I always thought that, well, if I ever got sick, I just go to the doctor. He's the guy with the diploma on the wall, and he'll fix me up. That was so naive, and that's how I went through the first portion of my life till I was probably about 29, and I came down with a very serious illness, or I thought I did. I was diagnosed as having multiple sclerosis by 2 neurologists. And I didn't know what that was for sure, but I looked it up and I didn't like what I read. I knew I was at the end of my life already. And I was 29 and I had a wife and 3 kids to support. And I was ready to talk about being depressed. I was pretty depressed. And to make a long story short, we could talk for a long time on that, but it turns out that there was a misdiagnosis, obviously. And what it really was that I'd run myself down. I was working very hard. I had the world on my shoulders. I thought, I've got to save the world, and I was running all over the country. I was giving speeches and driving and smoking and drinking a lot of coffee and probably drinking too much beer and wine at night, giving speeches, then having meetings afterwards and long talk fests into 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and then get up in the morning, get in the car, go to the next town. And I wasn't eating well. I didn't know anything about nutrition. All I knew is if it tasted good, it was good. So looking back on it, what really happened is that I'd run myself down. I'd practically destroyed my neurological system, and I just became paralyzed. And it was kind of a breakdown of my system. Well, here I am. I'm long past that point, and I've learned a lot from that point forward. And where I really got into it, Josh, is when it was about 1972, I think it was, that a good friend of mine who was a medical doctor, an MD in the San Francisco area, called me and asked me to help him write an article I had no idea why I could help him write an article. I said, what's going on, John? His name was Dr. John Richardson. And he had a great practice there in the San Francisco area. But he was a general practitioner, but a specialist with eye, ear, nose, and throat. But he started to treat some cancer patients in that area. And he started using a substance that had been recommended to him by his office manager. And he checked it out. It came from nature, was not approved by the FDA. They never heard of it, never looked at it, not approved. So he started to use it. He used it first on his dog who had terminal cancer. The dog recovered, to everyone's surprise. Then his head nurse came in and said, John, my husband has terminal cancer. There's nothing more we can do for him. Would you be okay if we tried this stuff on my husband? And he recovered. And so John got very interested at that point, and he began very cautiously treating his terminal cancer patients with this unapproved substance. And he started to save lives like never before. The survival rate went from, very, very poor, like 3%, up to about 70%. And so it didn't take long before patients were coming to his clinic from all over the world because the word got out. And that's when the medical establishment came in and said, Dr. Richardson, you've got to stop using this substance or we're going to take your license. You are using an unapproved medical substance, and that's illegal. And so John wanted me to write an article so he could have it published in the local newspaper or magazine to show why he was using it, how he thought it worked, what great benefit it had, so he could get the medical establishment off of his back, so he could continue to save lives. Mm-hmm. So I said, oh, well, sure, I'd be happy to do that. So I didn't know what I was getting into. You talk about a babe in the woods. I had no idea how much voltage was in that wire that I was going to grab hold of, this cancer industry wire. So I spent about 2 years in pretty intensive research. I thought it would take me 2 weeks or 3 weeks, but I spent 2 years. We produced a documentary film, and then I wrote a book on it called World Without Cancer, the story of vitamin B17. And that, Josh, thrust me into this world of natural medicine. For the first time, I took an interest in how the body works and what causes diseases. And I came out at the other side of that having, I think it was better than going to medical school, because the doctors I had been working with in that time and research period, many of whom had their own practices, went through medical school, and they were now using this substance called Laetrile, or amygdalin is another name for it. And every one of them said, they envied me. They said, I envy you, they said. And I said, why would you envy me? He said, well, because you didn't have to unlearn anything. So we went through medical school. We had to unlearn what we'd been taught about disease. And of course, that was an amazing thing to me. But it emphasizes the fact that we have a problem. Everywhere you look, you find problems in society and in our lives, in important areas of our lives. Mm-hmm. That's why the whole Red Pill Expo idea is so important. Health, politics, wars, everywhere you look. Now we get to this thing called diabetes and cancer. So I wrote the book on cancer, and since then I cannot tell you how many, probably 1,000 people by now have written me letters thanking me for writing the book, because they said, because of your book and the information I gathered from these doctors and researchers and put in the book. It was nothing that I did. I was just the guy that brought it together and tried to explain it.
I know a few people myself personally, all the way in Canada and other cities I've been to, that read that book and very, very much benefited from it.
Yeah, I just got a letter today as my email that came in today. It was made me feel good, puts a big smile on my face. But anyway, so lives have been saved because of it. And it's only, and out of that, here I'm coming finally to your question. I have gained a great respect for nature, and I'm very skeptical about test tube medicine. I know that test tube medicine, for the most part, what the researchers are trying to do is they found an herb or something, a vitamin in nature and found in food. And they found that it's very effective in the treatment of an illness. But you can't patent an herb. You can't patent vitamin B12, for example. So what you have to do is find a way to imitate it in the test tube and make a man-made concoction to imitate the real thing in nature. And now you can patent that because you made it. And if it happens to work as the original did, all the better. But usually, here's the catch, usually, in fact, almost always, what happens is the imitation brings side effects with it. So that it may actually do almost as good as the real thing, or the original in nature, but it also carries this baggage in of side effects, things that'll kill you. You solve one problem and create two more. So then you take two more drugs to solve those problems, and each of those create two more. So now you got 4 problems. And then this is why people wind up at my age, when they open up their medicine cabinet and all the bottles start falling out. They've got meds all across on the shelves. I don't take any of that stuff. And I'm bragging. Maybe I'm lucky. I'm sure I'm lucky. But the point is, it's a mindset. I discovered then that the best way to maintain health is to let the body do what it was designed to do. And that means give it its micronutrients and try and keep toxic things out of it. Give it a chance to do it. The body is its own healer if you just understand and let it do its thing. So now we come to diabetes and this substance that, before I get that, in the field of cancer, what the researchers found is that there is a substance in nature. It's found ubiquitously in nature, 1,400 edible plants. The trouble is, it's bitter to the taste. It's what you taste when you chew an apple seed. It's what you taste when you chew an apricot seed, very bitter. And so there's a story there. But anyway, I found out that all across these metabolic illnesses, in other words, they're not contagious. They're just like a degenerative disease or something the body has, it just stops working, not because the bug attacked it, but it's missing something. And diabetes and cancer that are perfect examples. Pernicious anemia, all these. Vitamin C solves scurvy. Scurvy is one of these diseases. And the solution is always found in nature, like scurvy. It's vitamin C, guys. You don't have to have a vaccine to prevent you from having scurvy. You just eat some limes or lemons or oranges or something like that. Okay, so now we're back to the diabetes thing finally. So about, I guess it was 12 years ago, thereabouts, I had high blood pressure. I think I didn't want to take my blood pressure because I didn't like it, what I was reading, but I think it was ranging around 160, 165, sometimes 170, over God only knows, maybe 100, maybe 95 to 110. I don't know. It was high. Every time I went to the doctor's office, they'd say, "Oh, you've got high blood pressure, and we recommend you take this medication out of a test tube." And I'm saying, "No, I don't want medication out of a test tube, thank you," because I knew that these drugs that they like to prescribe, these statins, they affect your brain. I mean, you'll forget who you are. They mess up your metabolic system. You'll probably die of something else. May not have high blood pressure, but you'll have 2 or 3 other things.
Complete domino effect that leads to 50 other prescriptions as well.
Yeah, exactly. So I didn't want that. Anyway, John Hewlett, who had a product for me, he said, "I'd like to I'll give you some of this if you'd like to try it." He says, "I think it'll reduce your blood pressure." All right, I'm willing to try anything. And I said, "It's not out of a test tube, is it?" He said, No, it's right from nature. It's a very unique blend of primarily fruits and vegetables. They're highly refined and very specially processed so you don't destroy the enzymes that are in them, not only the vitamins, the minerals, but the enzymes have to be alive and all of that. And I said, "Okay, I'll give it a try." Well, I couldn't believe it. A couple of weeks, my blood pressure was coming down, down, down. And after about 3 weeks, or maybe 4 at the most, I had the blood pressure of a young man again. I still do. I just took it yesterday, put the paper away, but it was 117 over 94, I think.
Wow. That's quite incredible. I mean, it makes me feel good to know that you were going around smoking and drinking and all sorts of stuff and speaking and traveling around in your 20s. And, I've quit smoking, but I'm definitely no sign of good health at my age, and I've often worried, that probably dramatically cut off years from my life. And you are a very healthy person at your age, and you are active and passionate about things, and your brain seems 100% there, and it's something that a lot of people, even
I wouldn't count on that, by the way.
well, I mean, as far as that goes, I mean, you see a lot of people in their 50s that have completely lost it. And I mean, it goes to show, the difference between what we're told by mainstream health officials, which isn't always wrong, but it's often very misleading. When you see people in their 50s that listen to that and their health is absolutely terrible, and then you see people like yourself that doesn't listen to that and does what you can to ensure as natural of a healthy life as possible. And I mean, it goes to show it's right there in front of all of us. Why have people existed for so long throughout all these years? The people in the Himalayas and the people in Nepal that are 120 years old and 115 years old, and they're living in the middle of nature. Their biggest concern is getting attacked by a wild animal, and they're not on a bunch of prescriptions, yet all the people that you see on all these prescriptions have lost their mind. They're addicted. They die at the age of 60, 70 of all these heart problems, strokes, you name it. So I think that really is an obvious discernible point to make, is that obviously you have to be responsible with it, like with anything else in life, but these people that are dependent, so heavily dependent on these prescription pills, these companies that push these prescription pills and their doctors, it's like being addicted to or being dependent on a drug dealer in a lot of cases. So just finishing it off, where can people find more information about diabetes and how they can help themselves kind of wean themselves off of all these pills?
Well, yes. Just to tie that together, this substance that I was talking about is called Cardio Miracle. Is what I took for my blood pressure, but it has effect on so many other things. And that's the same product that had a profound effect for people with diabetes too, type 2 diabetes. And it seems strange. Well, how can one substance do so many things? It's almost like snake oil, it's good for everything. Yeah. Well, it is good for everything because the way it works, according to my understanding at least, is that it's a precursor. It's an arginine. It's a protein, and it's a precursor for the body's own production of nitric oxide, which is a gas. It's produced right inside the arteries, in the artery walls. And nitric oxide, if you look it up on the internet, there's been thousands of research papers on nitric oxide. And it's just every paper you read, it's, oh, wow, this stuff really does this, it does that, it does this, it's wonderful. And but it's produced in the body. You don't, take a mask and breathe nitric oxide. And don't confuse it with let's see, there's another one that sounds just like it, but it's toxic. No, this is nitric oxide produced inside the body. I forgot. Anyway, yeah. You can take nitric oxide to the bank. That's the correct name. But the other one, it eludes me for the moment. So what this gas does is it, among other things, it causes the vessels of the blood to soften, become flexible, which is very helpful under stress. And it's of course what happens. The other opposite happens when you get old, because the arteries tend to get stiff. So when you go up a flight of stairs, the heart starts to pump, and the arteries are supposed to be flexible and allow more blood through when you need it, and so forth. But if they're rigid, then that's why you get out of breath when you get old. I can't do it anymore because your arteries are not doing their youthful thing. Well, that's mainly, two reasons, but the main thing is the lack of enough nitric oxide, which the body's ability to produce nitric oxide declines as you get older. And so it can be stimulated with this natural source, this arginine. And there's citrulline and a lot of other very great nutritional things that come out of these fruits and vegetables. So there's no mystery to it. In fact, there was a Nobel medical prize awarded on the technology behind this production of nitric oxide. is very famous, the discovery of that process. So that's all it is. And since it causes the arteries to relax, it means increased, better blood flow throughout all of your organs, including your brain, including your heart, including your muscles. So you have stamina. I mean, think about it. Increased blood flow means better oxygenation. That means better everything. So it is kind of, in a way, it's something that's good for everything because it increases circulation. Mm. And so it's not mysterious. It's no, it's no magic about it. Just understand the science, and that's how it works. So yeah, I put that in my Reality Zone online site because, boy, it did wonders for me. Mm. And anybody that's interested can just go to realityzone.com and look it up. I think we have 4 nutritional products there that I really recommend because I use them I don't put them in there because I just think we can sell them. It's because they made a difference in my life. And I feel I have an obligation because someone introduced me to these things. I should introduce others to it also. If John Hewlett hadn't told me about Cardio Miracle, I'd probably be dead by now. And so forth. We have another one. Well, you go take a look. There's one of the most interesting and controversial components in the site is something called Recharge. And all it is a telomerase stimulator. A telomerase is an enzyme that is produced by the body again. You're not giving it test tube stuff. You're stimulating the body to produce something that normally does. Telomerase is an enzyme that's produced in stem cells that causes the caps on the DNA to not shorten with age. It keeps those caps intact forever. It's like forever. That's why stem cells are considered to be the what do they call it? The ageless cell. They live for heart. They take a heart and put it in salt water, and it just pumps for years and years and years and years and years and years and years. Wow. It's because the telomeres don't get shortened. Every time a cell is replaced, they say, the new one has a little shorter cap on the telomere end. And that means each time you replace every 7 years, you got a new cell to replace that one, some more, some less, 7, sometimes 12. But on average, 7 years, every 7 years, you have a whole new body. All cells have been replaced with new ones. But each time it's replaced, that telomere cap gets a little shorter. And finally, when it's gone, your DNA cannot replicate anymore. And that's called old age. And it's ultimately called dying. So here comes a substance that promises to stimulate the production of telomere caps on all cells, not just stem cells. I looked at the science on it, and it looked pretty reasonable. It looked like it was very well done. It's not test tube stuff. This comes from a substance. It comes from astragalus, an herb. It's highly refined. It's not the astragalus. You can go down to the store and buy astragalus herbs, but it's not. You need a room full of that stuff to make one little pill of this cycloestrogenol, it's called. So we've got stuff like that. I've got 4 or 5 products if you're interested in what I do. I mean, I'm not saying it's going to work for anybody, but they work for me. You can go to realityzone.com and just look it up in the health section, and you'll see what we have there.
It's pretty incredible, all the possibilities out there that people just don't spend a few moments just thinking about and looking into. Your health is so important for your own well-being, how you feel, your mood. I mean, not being depressed all the time because you feel terrible and just progressively getting worse feeling with age every single day. There are ways to get around that, and it's very inspiring to see. And I wanted to finish this off today, Ed, with talking about the Red Pill Expo, because this is something that I'm extremely excited for. I can't wait to go. Of course, June 7th to 9th in Hartford, Connecticut, and of course, close to Boston, close to New York, East Coast. I'm looking very much forward to this. Can you talk a bit about the Red Pill Expo 2019?
Well, yeah, I'd be glad to. I think probably most of your listeners anyway know about the red pill meme. Take the red pill and see reality, break out of the matrix, don't be engulfed by illusion, all that sort of thing. It's a meme that comes from the movie, the sci-fi movie, The Matrix. And I thought it was a very powerful analogy to the real world that we live in today. So I thought, we talk a lot about a lot of heavy things that really are unpleasant to think about. And there's a tendency for people not to want to hear about it, because many of these things is way in the back of your mind. There's this thought, well, you can't do anything about it anyway. So what good does it do to know about it? What good does it do to worry about it? What good does it do to read books on it and find out how bad things really are if you can't do anything about it anyway? So I thought, well, that's true. I've been through that phase myself. I think I don't want to watch another bad news documentary film. I'd rather watch something else if I had the time. So we were thinking, how can we present this important information to people? Because we want to change the world. We really do. We're not kidding about it. We can't do it alone. Nobody can do this alone. But there are a lot of people out there. I mean, there are millions of people out there who think exactly as we do, but they all think they're alone. Most of them. They think, oh my gosh, I'm the only person in the world that sees it or that worries about it or that wants to do something about it. And as long as you are one person or think you're one person, then you're right. You can't do anything about it. But our goal is to bring these people together and form a coalition. And it's already beginning to happen, by the way. But the reason it's beginning to happen, I believe, is because we needed a method, a meme, an idea that would bring people together in a positive way and not be so heavy, not be so maudlin about everything. Have a little fun as we go along. I thought, well, I wonder if the red pill idea would be more accessible if we tried that. So let's try it, we said, back in 2017. Let's try putting on a red pill expo. How's that sound? Well, we were sitting around the table, the board of directors of the Freedom Force International, talking about how to reach out. And there was a moment of silence. Everybody's thinking about red pill expo. And there was silence. And then finally somebody said, yeah, I like it. Next person said, yeah, I like it too. And I finally decided I liked it. And so we decided it's pretty risky. Well, what have we got to lose? We got to do something. We can't just sit here, wondering, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? We have to do something. So we decided to put on a Red Pill Expo, where we would invite experts in so many of these fields we're talking about, who have taken red pills themselves. They now see life the way it really is, such as I took a red pill when I discovered that the Federal Reserve System was not a government agency, but was a banking cartel, which was out to plunder us legally. I took another red pill when I discovered the truth about cancer research and therapy. And there are so many red pills out there. I thought we'd find people who were experts in their fields who had taken red pills like that, who would be willing to come to our expo and stand up on stage and in short presentations, sometimes as short as 15 minutes, but usually about 20 minutes, half an hour. Some of our keynoters will speak longer, but just to get the information out. Okay, so we decided to try it. We put it on in Bozeman, Montana, of all places, thinking nobody would come. Well, they came. They came from all over the world. We had people from France and from Spain, from Mexico, Canada, Germany. I've forgotten all the countries. They came from all around the world.
All of the countries, yeah. And, I found it quite interesting. In 2017, I was one of those people going in like, I'm not sure a whole lot of people are going to come to Bozeman, Montana. Beautiful town, but it's a little out of the way. And I was amazed. I walked in, there's just crowds of people. It started off with, I saw 7 or 8 people in the hallway. And I'm like, uh-oh, this isn't good. And then suddenly, like a hurricane, just hundreds of people started coming in the doors all at once. And it was amazing. And in 2018 as well, just so many great speakers, and it connects so many issues, so many huge red pills from so many different angles. And then the people who are delivering the red pills are receiving red pills themselves. And this is one of the beautiful things about the Red Pill Expo, is that you have so many incredible people, and including in the audience, on the stage, with their booths, etc. And you meet incredible human beings that are all passionate about maybe not all of the things that are spoken of, sometimes they disagree with several of the things that are spoken of, but that's okay. They have their passions, and they care enough about those passions to try and spread that on, and also come up with some kind of idea about what we're going to do once we leave the expo, and that's another huge part of it. So for the Red Pill Expo 2019, you could see G. Edward Griffin speak, you could see Robert Kiyosaki, you could see Del Bigtree, and there's so many other people, Jeff Berwick, of course. You could see me if you want to see me, but I don't know. I'm going for sure to see all these incredible speakers, and to be able to talk with all of you that are watching as well. And we do have a link, an affiliate link for the Red Pill Expo below the video in the description and in the comments. YouTube keeps banning us from posting it in the comments, so we'll see. It's kind of off and on. So if it's not there, definitely check the description. But nonetheless, I'm really excited. I mean, where do you see the Red Pill Expo going past 2019 into the future, Mr. Griffin?
I see it going all the way into the future forevermore. It may not keep that name after 100 years, I don't know, but the idea will never go away. Because one of the things that I see in my own mind, after we solve the problems that we're facing here today, which is not going to be very easy, but after that is done, and we've how shall I say this? We're in the second model. I think the American Republic was sort of the beta model of a new way of putting governments together or states together, a way in which the rulers were not there to rule, but were there to protect. They really created a protectorate. It was the first time in history that a state was not created by the victors in warfare, that wasn't trying to be a government to govern people. They created a state that was to protect people. I think they should have called it a protectorate and not a government. But anyway, what they did create was a protectorate. It was pretty darn good for a beta model. It gradually began to come apart at the wheels after about 100 years, when corrupt people went into it and found loopholes so they could go in and aggrandize their own careers and all that kind of thing. But it was the first time in history something like that was tried, and was a brilliant success. Now we know how the predators destroyed it. And I'm hoping that someday in our lifetime, we'll be able to recreate another model, and based upon this experience, it'll be much even more precise and more useful and long-lived than the last one. Maybe instead of lasting 100 years or 120, maybe it'll last 500 years. And then it'll probably come apart because there'll be more ways that people figured out how to crack it. Then the next generation will have to go through all this again, fix it up. Then there'll be a third model, and that might last 5,000 years and so forth. I see this as an ongoing battle throughout eternity, where men have to defend their own liberties. If they don't want to be enslaved, they have to defend their liberties. And so we need not only the state, but we need a group outside of the state, a group of people like us. Let's just name it the way we are. We're the watchdogs. We're the ones that have no axe to grind. All we want to do is keep the system clean and keep it free and keep corruption out of it. That means probably about 0.5% of the population, but they're there. And they're ready to do this job, and they will be the ones putting on the Red Pill Expo forevermore. And as I said, it might be a different name, but if we don't have this force that comes from the citizenry, and not from the state, but from the citizenry itself, to sort of be watchdogs, we're going to lose the battle. So that's part of it. I see this as an essential part of the long-range strategy.
And defending liberties comes down to individual responsibility, which is the basis of freedom itself. So we got a lot on our hands, but I'm very optimistic going forward about it. And to see all these people come out and talk about all these issues and come together and come up with solutions, I think we are in good hands going forward, as well as we always have to look at that old Thomas Jefferson quote. You have to test a revolution every 20 years or so, or else it falls to those you fought against. And we've seen that happen, and we saw that happen with the central banking system, and we could go into this all day. But with that said, I really appreciate you joining us, and we will be doing this as much as we can, maybe weekly, maybe sometimes we'll skip a week. I don't know what's going to happen. We will do our best. I'm going to be in the Sahara Desert. Ed's obviously very busy, but we will do our best to bring you this information as much as possible. Again, check the links below for everything, and thank you for joining us again.
Okay, Josh, now just be careful you come back from the Sahara, okay?
I'm going to cross my fingers and hope for the best, and I'm hoping to come back and continue this show. So thank you for joining us.
All right, thank you. And if all else fails, I'll see you in Hartford.
I thought you were going to say the heavenly land. Okay, well, thank you very much. Like what you see here, OM? Don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated, especially as we are so heavily demonetized and censored by YouTube as these guys come in and flag all of our content as hate speech. The shadow banning is getting really bad, guys. Also, check our Bitcoin address right here on the screen or in the description below. We really appreciate it. And of course, check us out at the Red Pill Expo 2019. Of course, the great G. Edward Griffin and so many other incredible speakers will be there. Our link for that is below as well. And we cannot forget Mike Maloney's goldsilver.com, which you can also find in the description. One of the greatest market and monetary historians out there. We really encourage everyone to check that out. But until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
I'm sure you have already changed people's minds in your young age because you're involved, and I like that.